there, thrill seekers. That was from Starless by King Crimson. And somebody asked me, completely unrelated to the song Starless, about home leaving in the Buddhist sense. And home leaving is generally a euphemism for becoming a monk. And I did a video about this a while ago when I was in Las Vegas, and then I said on that video that I'd revisited it later when I had my books and things to refer to, but then I never revisited it until now. Now I'm going to revisit it because somebody asked a question. So, now, I covered this in my new book, my forthcoming book, The Other Side of Nothing, so this is a little bit of a preview of that book, I guess. Dogen says some stuff about home leaving. This is well known among Dogen scholars as kind of an issue with Dogen. So let's cut to the chase, and I'll read you some of the stuff he says about being a monk versus being a lay person. So this comes from a chapter called Sanju Shichibon Bodai Bumpo, which is 37, let me make sure I get this right, 37 Elements of Bodhi. Bodhi means enlightenment. Okay, so 37 Elements of Enlightenment. And in it, he is talking about the eightfold noble eightfold path. And when he gets to the part about right action, here's what he says. I'm just going to read you part of it because it goes on for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, pretty much 7 pages in the English translation. Now you think if you got 7 pages in English translation, or 7 pages in general, about right action, you're going to find out all about right action. Well, no, unfortunately not. What it basically is a rant about why it's better to be a monk. So let me read you a little bit of it. Right action is, as a branch of the path, is to leave family life. That means shukkei, become a monk. The footnote here says to leave home or to get out of family life, that is to become a monk. The term monk includes both men and women. That's the footnote. None has succeeded to the right action of the Buddha Dharma, and none has received the authentic transmission of the great truth of the Buddha Dharma without leaving family life, aka becoming a monk. Notwithstanding the scant pursuit of truth by lay people as upasaka and upasika, which is a layman and laywoman, there is no past example of one arriving at the truth. When we arrive at the truth, we inevitably leave family life. How can people who are not able to leave family life succeed to the position of a Buddha? Nevertheless, for the last 200 or 300 years in the great kingdom of Song, which is China, people calling themselves priests of the Zen sect have habitually said pursuit of the truth by a layman or lay person, let's say, because it's a non-gendered term in Japanese, and pursuit of the truth by one who has left family life are the same. They are a tribe of people who have become dogs for the sole purpose of making the filth and urine of lay people into their food and drink. Did you hear that, Ziggy? They've become dogs. Ziggy's sitting over here. Etc., etc. In order that they might feed upon tears and spit, they produce childish and demented talk like this. They are deplorable. They are not the kindred of the 7 Buddhas. They are demons and animals. And so on and so forth. And this goes on and on. Here's more about people who say that lay people and monks are the same. That is to say, utterly lacking in compassion for living beings, having no desire to preserve the Buddha Dharma, and solely wishing to feed upon the urine and filth of lay people, they have become evil hounds. He's really down on dogs here. And those dogs with human faces and dogs with human skin speak such words. Do not sit with them, do not speak with them, do not abide with them, etc., etc., on, and he even gets down here and gets into putting down Vimalakirti, who is a famous Buddhist layperson, has a sutra. It's, I think, the only Buddhist sutra named after a layperson. Do you not see that if old man Vimalakirti had left family life, aka become a monk, we would be able to meet with one more excellent than Vimalakirti. That is Vimalakirti Bhikshu, that is the monk Vimalakirti. And he goes on and on and on about how Vimalakirti should have become a monk, and so on and so forth. So he really pours it on, lays it on thick, as we say. There's 2 other chapters in Shobo Genzo. One is called Shuke, which means leaving home, and one is called Shuke Kudoku, which means praise of leaving home, where he expresses similar sentiments. Like, there's no way in heck that a lay person could ever become enlightened. The end, says Dogen. However, if we turn to Shobo Genzo Book 1, we can read in Bendoa. Someone says, this is the Q&A section of Bendoa, someone says, should this practice be undertaken by laymen and laywomen, or is it performed only by people who have left home? And Dogen says, I say, an ancestral master has been heard to say that with respect to understanding of the Buddha Dharma, we must not choose between men and women, high or low. Then someone asked, people who leave home have got free of all involvements at once, so they have no hindrances in practicing zazen and pursuing the truth. How can a busy layperson devotedly do training and be at one with the unintentional state of Buddhist truth? And Dogen says, in general, the Buddhist patriarch, that's Buddha, overfilled with pity, left open a wide and great gate of compassion so that all living beings could experience and enter the state of truth. What human being or God could not want to enter? And then he gives a bunch of examples of various lay people who practiced the Zazen and Buddhism and became enlightened. So one of the explanations that you'll often hear about this is that Bendoa, which I just read for you, was written in 1231, and the material I read for you from, what was it called, 37 Elements of Bodhi was written in, let me make sure, 1244, so that's 13 years later. So the standard explanation for some people is that Dogen changed his mind. But I am skeptical of that explanation because Dogen is known to have revised, for example, Genjo Koan into the 1240s, and Genjo Koan isn't so explicit as Bendoa about lay people, but it was written as a letter to a lay person, so it can be viewed as instructions for a lay person how to practice the Buddha Dharma. And as I said, he was revising that he never really finished Shobo Genzo. He died before he could finish it, but he evidently intended Genjo Koan to be part of it in the finished version, and he was revising it late into his life, even at around about the same time anyway, as he wrote the stuff saying that lay people couldn't become enlightened. Now, Shohaku Okumura has something to say about this that I found in an article he wrote for a Buddhist online magazine. And this is Okumura Roshi's opinion, which I like. Dogen had some disappointment after working hard with aristocrats. I think he had some disillusionment about the people in the upper class of society like emperors. His father was a secretary of the emperor. His grandfather was a prime minister, so he knew that society. When he was young, he was kind of idealistic. He thought that if he presented genuine Dharma, people would accept it and support him and create a good Dharma world. But after 10 years of his practice in Kyoto, Dogen found that this was a dream. And Okumura Roshi relates his own experience of seeing the Japanese prime minister having a photo of himself taken while sitting zazen, and how insincere he thought that was. And he continues saying that Dogen, later in his life, wanted to make a small place where a small number of people could practice. I don't think he rejected lay people, but his idea was for a small number of monks to practice at the monastery in a quiet place, and for lay people to support and join the practice whenever they can, and so forth and so on. And also, something I should have pointed out earlier in the video, another quote I had pulled for you, Shobo Genzo Zui Monki, which was written sort of between the two pieces that I just read. So in the late 1230s or maybe early 1240s, Dogen is saying, even if we don't have bowls and robes and so on, we should practice with the resolution that even a lay person can practice the Buddha way. Anyway, robes, bowls, and other things are simply the ornaments of monkhood. The genuine Buddha way does not depend on such things. So he's kind of all over the map here. There's a few things to mention here. One is that Dogen isn't regarded by me, or I think most people in this stream of study, as a prophet or God or somebody who is infallibly always right. So we don't have to listen to him when he talks about this. We can kind of reject it if we want, because he was just a guy. My opinion is he had brought a bunch of monks to the wilderness of Echizen Prefecture, which was in the middle of nowhere, and he wanted to encourage them in their practice and make them feel like it was really worthwhile what they were doing, becoming monks and doing this hard life. And he wasn't about to say, oh yeah, it's just as good if you didn't even come here in the first place. So I think these admonishments are not, they weren't meant to be sent out to lay people of the world. You have to remember that this was written as a speech for a group of, probably less than 20 monks up in the mountains, and not written in the way, not written for the kind of publication that it enjoys today in a nice little book that you can go on Amazon and anybody can read. So, he probably never really even intended this to be heard or read by anybody other than the monks he was actually talking to when he wrote it. So he's giving them encouragement. And the other point that I made in my earlier video is it would be stupid to think that the universe cares about whether somebody puts on a certain set of robes and does a certain ceremony, aka becomes a monk, or not. That doesn't make any sense. So there's no sort of magic that happens when you become a monk that enables you to become enlightened that won't happen if you don't become a monk. The only sort of explanation that would make any sense at all along those lines, at least as far as I could think of, would be that maybe the monks have figured out the only way to become enlightened, and they're telling us that you have to do all this because we've figured it out. We've tried all the other ways and they don't work, but this one works, and this is the path of monkhood. Which, if nobody's ever explained it this way, this is just something I came up with last night when I was thinking through this video. But I don't, even though I thought of that, I don't really put much stock in it, I think there are lots of ways. In contemporary Buddhism in Japan, the shukkei ceremony is given to people who don't leave home in the technical sense. I took the shukkei ceremony, the home leaving ceremony, but I took it from my teacher Nishijima Roshi, who was married and had a child and lived in an apartment in, I think he lived in Yokohama. I never actually visited his apartment, but anyway, he lived a normal life. He gave it to me while I was living a normal life in, working a job in Tsuburaya Productions, making Ultraman and all of this. So the definition of shukkei, of home leaving, to that stream of Buddhist monks is not as hard and strict as it had been before. And you can be shukkei, you can be a monk, you can leave home kind of conceptually without actually leaving home and going off and living in a monastery. But I should say that not everybody accepts this. A story I told in Hardcore Zen was that I used to go to this vegetarian restaurant that was in Nakano Broadway, which is a sort of shopping center in Tokyo that has a lot of Japanese monster and anime stuff in it. It's just full of these little shops that just cater to that crowd, that otaku crowd. And I used to go there a lot. There was a vegetarian restaurant on the second floor, a little tiny place with about 5 seats. And it was run by this Chinese woman who was some kind of Buddhist. And when I was going to get my, when I did get my head shaved to become a monk, I went to a barber shop in Nakano Broadway and had my head shaved. And right afterwards, I went upstairs. I think the barber shop was on the first floor. Anyway, I went upstairs and had a meal. And the lady asked me, why did you get your head shaved? And I said, well, I'm going to do shukkei, the ceremony. And she got really angry because she said, Japanese monks don't know anything about home leaving, and this is not the real home leaving, and Japanese monks are just monks in name only, etc., etc. So there are people outside of the Zen stream, or the Japanese version of the Zen stream, who find this idea offensive. But I don't find the idea offensive. I've never been that kind of a monk. Technically, I guess I'm a monk in the Japanese sense because I took all the ceremonies and did all the things and got all the robes and the accoutrements and everything else. But I've never lived in a monastery. The closest I ever came was I spent 6 weeks in Tassajara, which is a Zen monastery. I'd done like 4 weeks in Tassajara, 3 weeks and 2 weeks, and different lengths, but the longest stay I ever did in Tassajara was 6 weeks. So 6 weeks of living like a monk is all I got, as far as a consecutive long stretch of doing it. But I don't feel like it's absolutely necessary to commit to that. You commit to the practice, you commit to the precepts, you commit to all the rest of it. It doesn't matter that much if you go and live in a monastery. We could ask my friend Shozan Jack Hobner, aka Gento, about that stuff, because he actually did that for years and years, and maybe one of these days I'll set it up where I talk to him on this channel like I've been promising, and we can talk about that. But there's one quote that comes to mind, which is Shunryu Suzuki says in some book, I don't remember which, that there are different ways to practice Buddhism, and if you're very strange, you might have to go to a monastery. So that was his opinion, as a guy who'd spent a lot of years in a monastery, Shunryu Suzuki, the founder of the San Francisco Zen Center. So there you go. There's some inconclusive stuff about becoming a monk. And if you want to support my monk-like monk life, you can go to the URL you were seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my Patreon and PayPal accounts. Those are my only ways of making a monk living right now, especially since I'm not getting any book royalties until the new book comes out. So I really appreciate your support, and as always, this is offered for free, so you don't gotta pay if you don't want to pay. So anyway, there you go. Have a good time all the time. See you later. Bye. Ziggy, how do you feel about what Dogen has to say about dogs? Do you feel like it's unfair to dogs? Do you feel like you should cancel Dogen for saying bad things about dogs? About the filth and urine and all that stuff? Although you do like to stick your nose up other dogs' butts, so don't know, man. Alright, we'll talk to you later, Ziggy. Bye.